Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so thrilled today to be joined by the director of the Valet, Richard Wong. And I wanted to start by asking you about finding the right tone in which to tell this story, because at the center and at its heart, it's really a story about friendship and family, connectivity with other people. And at the same time, you're also creating a dialogue that talks about the treatment of immigrants in America, the class system, and the way that we value one another, and a lot of other aspects within that. And so, how did you find the right tone that was really going to capture all of that and focus those kind of deeper themes through character?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a comedy, we're talking about some pretty important stuff. But we always say we had a saying on set that comedy was the best way to smuggle in really important themes. And I think, we actually did very much care about these things and very much took a look at what was going on in the world today and wanted to tell a story that I think is relevant to what we think is missing today. And I think human connectivity is a big part of that. So I think tonally, I think we were always going to have a funny movie no matter what. We had Eugenio, it's Mara. We had a really, really funny script. I think for me, telling a story that about an immigrant family, something that I really recognize in my own life, growing up in a Chinese immigrant family. Like when I read the script, I recognized all these things from my own life. And I thought, wow, it's interesting. We have a Mexican American family and I have a Chinese American family. And I recognize all these things. They're all like exactly the same. And I just think even that little idea of connectivity is something that I thought was really important and really I wanted to make sure that permeated throughout kind of every relationship in the whole movie. And I think as long as we approach the movie like that, the heart was going to come. And so I think because we have such creative comedy geniuses on the movie, I wasn't so much worried about that. What I really wanted to focus on was getting that heart. And then, making sure that tonally we could meld those two things, because I think mashing up tones is always very, very difficult, but my favorite thing to do.
I love that. And also when you look at the film, there's almost two different visual worlds to it as well.
Yeah.
You've got Samara's character's world, which is much darker colors, much more neutral and kind of almost shadowy. And then Antonio's world, Eugenio's character, that world's very vibrant, very bright. Like there's a lot of color there. And then you kind of find that space where they come together in the middle. What was the initial kind of delineation and construction of those two worlds to create two worlds that felt very visually different and really represented the different journeys of these characters?
I so appreciate that you noticed that. Yeah, that's something that as early as my initial presentation on the movie, that was really important to me to make sure we had we used everything we had to tell the story, including color palette and lighting and everything, and that's something we were very specific about. Like anytime, like for example, when I went to see the apartment set for the first time, I literally walked around and took everything that was blue out of the apartment. Which is the set dresser was, but that all that stuff I think matters, and all, even on a subconscious way, because I think another thing that was really important that me and the DP talked about a lot, and the producers, is that we didn't want to. I think there's a tendency to get hyper simple about these things and like, oh yeah, like his world could be like gritty, but like that wasn't my experience growing up with my family. We didn't have a lot of money, but it never felt gritty to me. It always felt vibrant. I think in a sense, your family is what makes it vibrant, and it gives it a brightness. And I think visually, I really much wanted to represent that. And I think, making her world colder again is just about representing, I think, just where she is psychologically. Because I think, there's I think a very general idea that like a big Hollywood movie star, like her life's great, and I think it was important for us to show that both of these characters had in some ways very similar things going on, but from completely different parts of the world and very, 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 very different lives, but have similar things. And I think that's ultimately very much the theme of the movie, and how you could find human connectivity in places you wouldn't expect.
Yeah. One of the other details that I really wanted to ask about was Eugenio's hair in the movie, because
Yeah.
it's such a great visual gag, but again, also a character detail, because he's got, that very specific, unique haircut throughout the beginning. And that's the way that he chooses to style his hair, however questionable it may be. And then, Olivia kind of like starts molding him a little bit. So his hair changes. And then when they kind of separate and pull apart a little bit, his hair goes back to the original. And so you really kind of actually used hair both as a comedic plot, but also to tell character again.
Yeah, I think we used all of our cinematic tools. We tried to use, I think that was one of my major, what do you call it, MOs when it comes to all the departments, is to make sure we're telling a story. Every department has a story to tell, in their own way. And I think if we all, if we all come together with all those different things, then we help tell that story. And I also think departments appreciate their ability to tell a story. Everyone has, I think as a director, you're really bringing together all these people, all these amazingly creative people. I think it's utilizing all of that is super important. And so the hair was about that. And I will say that the hairstyle itself was 100% Eugenio's idea. He talks to everybody. He's really, truly one of the kindest people I've ever met in my whole life. And nobody is invisible to Eugenio. And here we have a movie about a character who's invisible. And I think that's why Eugenio is so primed to play him, because no one is invisible to Eugenio. And in that sense, he did quite a lot of research in this movie. And that hairstyle, he was adamant that hairstyle was the right hairstyle. And I think he was right.
I mean, there's a lot of really good visual comedic beats within the film, and kind of tiny details. Like even when they first go out to lunch, the salad that, Samara's character Olivia orders is the tiniest salad I've probably ever seen in my life. And she's like, oh, great, like a full, delicious meal. What was your journey of really finding what those little details were going to be visually on screen, and how far you could take them? Because even, the night after they've been at the apartment, the makeup on her face feels like there was probably some playing around with like, how far can we take this?
Yeah. And that was Samara's idea. Again, when you cast right, you have when you have creative partners. Making a movie is not about, one person dictating everything. It's all about all the creative partners coming together and making this thing. And I think my job is to kind of give everyone the kind of the same direction. But but I think the visual aspect of the movie, I guess coming up as a DP, the visuals are always very important to me, but also we took things too far too. I think specifically with Samara's character, because I think one thing Samara brought to the character that I really love, that wasn't necessarily on the page, was just this goofiness and this very kind of real goofiness, because I do think we're very much playing with the very idea of what a Hollywood movie star is, and there's a very curated life publicly for a Hollywood movie star, so to see her be really goofy, really clumsy, sometimes inarticulate was really something fun for us to play with. And I think, it was important to me to give the actors the creative, the room to play around on set, to give them the time to go through the process of like, let's try one even bigger, let's go really nuts. And then, all right, that was too nuts. That was too nuts. But and I think to me, that's just really fun, because I think the creative process in of itself is fun. And I think part of that process is exploring a little bit. I definitely don't like to work where we have this very strict idea, like we should find room to make things better, Eugenio too, like there's plenty of times with Eugenio, I would be like, oh man, that was so funny, we're good. He's like, I think it could just be a little bit funnier. And then he would go for it, and sometimes it would be, and sometimes it would be, but that was very much the spirit of what we were doing.
I also really enjoy the way that you've kind of played around with genre, with the romantic comedy genre, because at the end of the day, it's a friendship coming together, and yet you're still using elements of the genre in how that comes together. They have how they initially meet. There's the moment where Samara is walking up to Eugenio outside of the restaurant, and everything's like very slow motion between the two of them, even though it's not a romantic moment. And what were some of the ways that you enjoyed, visually and stylistically playing around with the genre, but also kind of like winking to it because you're exploring a friendship versus a romantic relationship?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of cinema, as you might imagine. But I also just love mashup. A mashup is really my favorite thing. I mean, my first one's a musical. Like, I really just like the art of cinema and what you could do with it. And I think being a DP is obviously part of that. But yeah, here we are making a movie about Hollywood a little bit too. So I think it was fun to be able to play with that very idea and have like suddenly Eugenio's world become a movie in a sense, and play with those kind of slow motion scenes. I mean, if you notice though, every single one of those slow motion scenes cut out hard to real life, and that was on purpose because life isn't a movie in the end, but that was something really fun to play with that I think we're also able to use. It wasn't just cool to be cool. I think also tells a story.
And there's also a really great B plot line going on between the two PIs that are each kind of following this potential couple to try and uncover the truth from different sides, and the way that they come together so much during the film. And that really felt like a moment that could have initially been a few throwaway scenes, but really becomes this beautiful friendship again developing between the two of them. And so how did you want to approach, again, exploring that relationship dynamic within the genre, but it being these two guys who are PIs trailing a couple?
Yeah, I mean, when I first read about the two PIs, again, it struck me as like, it's one of the things that made me really realize like, oh, this is a movie about finding human connection and where you wouldn't expect it, and I just think that's why those PIs become important in the movie, because it's so as funny as they are and as I think tertiary as they seem to be, I think ultimately it follows everything that we're talking about in the movie. But also those two guys are just so funny. Like, they made it impossible to cut out. but no, I really do like when we shot the last scene with them, and that was on our last day too. There was something just very magical about that and very moving about this idea that there's connection to be found everywhere, and with everyone. And again, we have a movie about a character who's invisible, two characters really. I mean, that's the thing, like Antonio's character is, I think, what you would traditionally think of as invisible, but I think Samara's character is also invisible in her own way. She's like the most visible person in the world, and that makes her invisible. That's such a fascinating thing to have these two characters who are completely opposite sides of the spectrum that both feel invisible. And I think the idea that we can connect those two things, that people can connect on these human things, is something that I think is really important today.
Absolutely. And lastly, I was interested in what the challenges were in making this movie with the sheer volume of characters that you end up bringing to screen, because there's so many characters that come onto screen that again could just be there for a second, but we really feel like we get the chance to know them. The character of Mr. Kim that comes in as a relationship side to Antonio's mom, becomes someone that we really know, and we get to see his extended family. When you look at the number of people that you're bringing onto screen and making sure that we have the contextualization of who they are, is a huge volume. And so what were the challenges that came with making sure that you really kind of captured them all very richly?
It was a huge challenge. I tell you, those scenes in the apartments were, I would say, some of the most challenging things I've ever had to do, for sure. Not only in the shooting of it, which was epic because there's just so many characters, and again, just like you said, it was important to me to give all those characters a moment, because Eugenio and I talked about it very specifically. Like, one thing he hates in movies is are characters that come in movies and again, a movie that's about being seen, having these characters come in and they mean nothing. And so it's important for us that, like, oh yeah, this is the family, like Chucho, right? But we need to give Chucho a moment because, like, he's part of that family. And I think, again, it's about seeing everybody. It's about making sure we see the people that we usually don't see, and that in a way mattered for us on kind of our smaller characters even, but yeah, it is a lot to balance out, especially in the edit, but it was important to us. So I think because we paid so much attention to that very specific idea, I think we tried our best to pull it off.
Well, you did a great job with it, and thank you so much for talking about the film. Really appreciate it, Richard.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.